Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of David Twigg. This story is not all that it seems, so let's go. Sin and Tonic! Just to let you all know, feeling much more like myself this week, much happier, got my shit together, and have a new mug for the occasion. It says, "You've got this." Yes, I have. Yeah. And it has sparkly gin. Check me out being really spicy, because I even brought the bottle up to the shed because I thought I'm in the mood. I'm in the mood for a drinky poos. It's a Monday, but what's wrong with that? Let's get into today's story. Oh, one more thing, sorry. Scarf season, it's back. Without further ado, let's get into today's story. It takes place in a place called Birch-le-Marsh. It's on the outskirts of Skegness, which is in Lincolnshire, I believe. I was never very good at geography, but I just know that it sounds funny. Birch-le-Marsh. I better check that's right. Birch-le-Marsh. Hello. Search. Birch-le-Marsh. Oh fuck, it's not. My phone had auto-corrected burr to birch. Okay, so today's story does not begin in Birch-le-Marsh. It's Burr-le-Marsh. Still an unusual name. Okay, forgive me. Burr-le-Marsh. It's a district of Lincolnshire in England. Okay, that's where today's story takes place. Glad we sorted that out. I thought Birch-le-Marsh wasn't right. Anyway, small community, village, that sort of vibe. Very, very, everyone knows each other sort of place. Like here. David Twigg, he lived in Lincolnshire his whole life. Also David Twigg. There's some really great names coming up in this. I've never heard of that surname before, but I like it. His parents were Roy and Janice Twigg, and David had a very close relationship with his parents. They got on very, very well. At the time of our story, David is 46. He was incredibly well known in the village because he was a joiner. So things like windows and doors, working with wood, things like that. Very, very crafty, hands-on, creative as well. But because of his job, he knew lots of people in the village because he would have done lots of work for everybody. He was that person. Need a door, speak to David, that sort of vibe. And everyone had nothing but nice things to say about him. He was incredibly kind, really sweet, nice, lovely, wonderful. Lots of these words came up when people were speaking about David. David was married to somebody called Julie, and they had been married for 15 years at the time of our story. And they lived together in a very semi-rural bungalow. So on the outskirts of their village, in the countryside. Lovely. I'll share some pictures because it was an unusual kind of property in a way. So there was a bungalow in which they lived. Bungalow. Lots of you are in America, I'm sure. Do you have bungalows? I've said the word too much. Bungalow, bungalow, bungalow. Bungalows. A one-level home. Not like a mobile home, a proper building, but just one level. No stairs, no upstairs. Although you can get a bungalow, a chalet bungalow, which effectively is a house. But don't need to go into that detail. Bungalow. On their land, and I believe attached to the bungalow that they lived in, was a very, very big workshop. Like I said, David was a joiner, and he needed this big workshop, lots of equipment to do his job, and a big store at the back where he kept like lots of tools, materials, things like that. So it's a big old place. Also an office. There was an office, and this is where Julie would spend most of her time. So while David was the physical labour, he was the joiner, Julie worked in the office and she dealt with the finances, the bookings, appointments, things like that. So she was in the office. They worked really, really well together. They spent all of their time together. It takes quite a lot, I think, for a couple to do that. Again, people in the village, they just said they were a wonderful couple. They were made for each other and they worked really well together, considering that they spent all of their time together. This relationship was just spot on. David's parents, Roy and Janice, like I said, they were really close to David, but they loved Julie. They took her on as like their daughter of their own. They just really, really loved her. They had a lot of time for her. So everything here is sounding beautiful and rosy, isn't it? Until the 13th of March 2011, things become less rosy. But of course, otherwise it wouldn't be a Sin and Tonic story. A 999 call is made that evening. And it is Julie. Oh dear. Tragedy has struck, very sadly, because this is, like I said, a wonderful couple, part of the community. Everybody liked them. So, you know, when you read things, you're like, oh, couldn't have happened to nicer people, that sort of thing. And it really is tragic. Julie calls the emergency services and she says 2 men entered their workshop and they attacked them. This is not good, is it? So they attacked the couple while they were working. They then set fire to the building and Julie had managed to escape. She'd fled and poor David was still stuck inside of this burning building. So she's on the phone to 999. She said that she tried to get back into the building and she literally couldn't. There was just too much smoke and she couldn't get back in. And she was desperate. She was like, my husband, can you imagine? My husband's trapped inside this burning building. Like, oh my gosh. It took about 5 minutes for the fire brigade to arrive. When they did, they found Julie in the yard. I think they had quite a lot of land around their bungalow workshop thing. It's quite a big place, it looks like it, and it's semi-rural, so quite a lot of land, and she was in the yard. Welcomed them in, as if she was probably in an absolute state of panic, but she was there, and she took them round to where the fire was and where her husband was trapped. This was where the big storeroom was, so it wasn't in the actual workshop, it was just outside of the storeroom area. And when they arrived, most of the flames had died down and gone out. It was just really smoky and charred and stuff like that, but the actual immediate fire was out. They then went looking for David. So they've gone into this building. It's very, very smoky, but like I say, wasn't a huge fire. It's not like they'd set the whole place alight. So they'd set this sort of small fire near the storeroom. And then it became apparent that David was in the storeroom. So this is now getting a bit like, okay. When they get to the storeroom, the door is locked. It's freaking locked. So this is just, what? Fearing that David was in fact inside this locked storeroom, they then had to break the door down. It was quite a heavy looking door and they had to break it down to gain entry into it. And really sadly, when they opened the door, David just fell out and he was unconscious. Poor David had been on his knees leaning against the door, almost like in a prayer position, or I don't know, but he was kneeling down, leaning against the door. That was his only means of escape from that room, so just sad. Paramedics arrived and they had to move David. They moved him from that room. There was a lot of smoke and they put him into the back of the ambulance, and that's where they worked on David for quite a long time to try and save his life. But really sadly, he had just inhaled far too much smoke and he was pronounced dead. During this time, Julie was in an absolute state of hysteria. When she saw David being brought out of the building, she was beside herself. She got taken to hospital herself in an ambulance while they were working on David. What was that noise then? That wasn't my phone. Don't like things like that. Was it my phone? No, my phone's on silent. What was it? Help! It sounded like a phone, but my phone's on silent. Okay, I'm going to move on. Where did I get to before the devil interrupted me? I think it's my ice cubes melting. Cheers. Julie had some superficial injuries, really. She had inhaled a bit of smoke. She had some singed hair and obviously was hysterical. So they took her in. Really sadly, when she was in hospital, they had to inform her of her husband's passing. And obviously she was distraught. She was very, very upset. Later on that evening, the police spoke to Julie. So they wanted to get a much clearer picture of what had happened, obviously, because they've just turned up and then shit went down. She said that they were working in the workshop and I think they were doing something, she said, together, moving something, whatever. And these two men came in. Now, these men were completely in black. They had black hoodies on and black masks. And she said you could only see their eyes. She thought from what she could see they were both white, but she wasn't sure. And she was pretty certain that they were both men. These men then started to attack Julie and David. And quite quickly, it sounds like, they then put David into the store cupboard. And then they set a fire outside of the store cupboard and then left. They locked him in and then they left. They ran off. She had managed to get away when they were setting this fire and getting David into the storeroom. She'd run off, like, just in panic and, like, you know, what's it, fight or flight, where you just like, get me out of here. She did that. She got away. And when she was outside, she immediately called 999. When she was on the phone to 999, she saw these two men bugger off. They ran off and she could tell them what direction they'd gone and stuff like that. So she gave the police all of this information. After they had gone and she'd seen them flee, she decided to go back and try and get into the building to help David. Excuse me, things are falling down. Falling down. She opened the door and she just said it was just so thick with black smoke. She could not get in. She couldn't get in to help him. And then she had to wait 5 minutes, which must have felt like an age when you're panicking and just, well, I mean, that's horrific, isn't it? She had to wait these 5 minutes for the ambulance to arrive. Fire brigade. The investigation would begin. They had to take Julie's clothes because they wondered if they could get DNA of the attackers from her clothes. Clever thinking, because they'd attacked her as well. They weren't sure about getting much evidence from the crime scene because there had been a fire. So fingerprints, they did dust. They went to the place, they dusted for fingerprints and tried to find DNA, all this sort of stuff. So they did the usual. They also searched outside because the attackers had run away. Could they find anything? Had they dropped anything? Also, they needed to find the key because the key had been used to lock poor David in the storeroom, but it was nowhere to be found. They found the keys in a neighbouring property on their land. So they just ditched them. And they were in the direction, they found them in the direction that Julie had said the attackers had run. So it was all piecing together. The fire department, they went to the scene the following morning because they wanted to determine what had gone on, and that's a whole nother piece of trickery, isn't it? All of the forensics around fire, it's so clever, blows my mind. I do love CSI. I haven't watched it for ages, but I'm thinking I need to watch it like from the very, very beginning. There's so many different CSIs now, but I like the one with Gil. Oh my God, what's he called? Grissom. Oh, Grissom. How could I forget him? I like the one with him. And Sarah. Oh, yeah, so homely. That with a cup of tea and a biscuit. Right. The fire department, they found that the attackers had poured petrol just onto the floor outside the storeroom, just poured it and then just lit it with a match. So they had literally just nothing fancy. That's what they did. Now, effectively, let's think about this. Why? What has gone on here? Why? I mean, really, you wouldn't do that unless you were trying to kill the person that you've just locked in that cupboard, unless you're a moron. Like, that's not going to scare somebody. That is going to kill them, isn't it? They are locked. There is a fire outside the door. That is murder. So what has gone on? Like, who would want this wonderful David that everybody says is amazing and beautiful and kind and wonderful? Who would want him dead? Nothing was taken. Nothing was stolen from the workshop. So it seems like these guys came in with the sole purpose to murder poor David. Is there more to this story? The post-mortem showed that David had sadly died from smoke inhalation, and I cannot imagine being locked in a freaking room and just like then not being able to breathe. It is horrific. I hope he just was unconscious quick. Motive became a real key point here in the investigation. The police also did really need to find, well, any evidence that they could. So they appealed for witnesses because even though David and Julie lived in a semi-rural location, lots of dog walkers, things like that, they would have possibly been about at the time of the incident. I think it was about 6:30 in the evening. So that's what they were appealing for. Any dog walkers or hikers or anyone like that in the area that might have seen something. As you can imagine, this rocked the community. Small, tight-knit community. Everyone knows everyone. You know what like happens with Julie next door and all of that business and there's no secrets. And then to think that two people have walked into somebody's house business and murdered somebody, that is scary as hell. I know that if that happened down the road, I would be frightened too. So yeah, people were panicking. This place had a really low crime rate. This is like a village. Although that made me think of Hot Fuzz. Have you seen Hot Fuzz? Never large. You never know. Police were thinking a robbery gone wrong. Were they expecting David and Julie not to be there? 6:30. Maybe they thought they'd be in the bungalow by then and they were interrupted. But I can't... That's an extreme, isn't it? They didn't bop him on the head. They didn't tie them up and get on with robbing the place. They locked him in a cupboard and set the place on fire. You know, don't fit, does it? But there was a lot of expensive equipment in that workshop. So Julie issued a statement, heartfelt, saying that this was her husband, her soulmate, like, you know, really touching. The police, they appealed for witnesses, like I said, and Crime Stoppers, they got involved and they offered, I think, £3,000 as a reward for anyone that would come forward with information that could help in the case. When they went door to door, the police went to the local petrol station. Oh my gosh. For anyone in this country, you will know what is going on at the moment with the petrol stations. It's gone crazy. There is a fuel shortage, but it's not a fuel shortage. There is not a fuel shortage, but you cannot get petrol because everyone's gone bonkers because a whistleblower let it slip that there's not enough lorry drivers to get the petrol to the petrol stations and there's going to be this big crisis. But in reality, they have created a crisis because now everyone is panicking that there is going to be a problem. So everyone went to a petrol station and it's like madness. It is crazy. I'm going to share some pictures of what it's like around here in this country with everyone going batshit crazy trying to get petrol. And it's scary, honestly. I just want to stay in the shed because it's like apocalyptic. I don't like it at all. So yeah, that's what's going on now. And how weird that there is a petrol station in my story today. I didn't do it on purpose. I digress. At the petrol station, they found out an interesting fact. David and Julie's post was redirected to the petrol station. Why? So all of their post is redirected to the petrol station and then once a week or whatever, Julie will come and collect it. She'll come and pick up her post, their post. That's bizarre. This was Julie's request. Small village, the petrol station owner was like, okay, no worries, fine. He thought possibly something had gone on and that they didn't want people to know where they lived. What is going on? Are they part of a secret mafia? Like crazy. Very mysterious. As part of this investigation, David and Julie's bank accounts were looked into. Had something gone on here? Was there something suspicious in the money? Because quite often crafty things happen, well, naughty things happen because people are greedy. Would someone benefit from David being dead? They discovered something quite shocking. This well-established, well-liked couple in the community with their lovely, well-run, successful joinery business, ooh, things were not as they seemed. This business was very, very nearly bankrupt. It was not going well. The business was in debt of over £40,000. It's quite a lot. And there was a warrant out. There was a warrant out for David's bloody arrest because he was not paying his debt. This was a financial pickle, to say the least. This made the police really, really suspicious because Julie had not disclosed any of this information to the police, and they'd interviewed her numerous times. This is something that you would need to share. This is important information. Why has she not shared it? Is she scared of somebody? What the hell is going on in this small village town in England? I'm going to start telling you some answers now because otherwise you are going to go insane and not like me. The police went back to the beginning and they combed over the evidence again because they thought they were missing something and they were starting to actually feel that something was off. Around this time, the police would get the results back from the forensic testing that had been done on Julie's clothes. The manner of which this was found suggested that Julie had been holding the petrol can at some point that evening. Now, she had never mentioned this at all in any of her interviews. Again, very suspicious now. What is going on, Julie? Experts also looked into Julie's injuries. They were not consistent with Julie's story. They were not at all. They were actually consistent with a vapour cloud injury. Now, this is something where if you were to light a fire or be very, very near to a fire that has just been lit with an accelerant, like that, you get a vapour cloud, and that vapour cloud is really hot. It would singe your hair, whereas walking into a smoke-filled room would not, and that's what she said she had done. They just basically looked at the information in front of them and said, this doesn't match with what she's telling us. They said that there was no doubt that Julie had been incredibly close to the fire when it had been lit. They also said that she had definitely held the petrol can. Also at this time, the police checked the CCTV. They checked it in the town and the village nearby. They obviously wanted to cover all bases, and 2 days before this awful event, who can be seen at the local petrol station, probably after collecting their freaking mail, buying a can of petrol? Ding, ding, ding. Yes, you're right. Julie. Bloody hell, Julie. On the 6th of June in 2011, Julie was arrested. And she was calm as a freaking cucumber. Not odd at all. Now, this is where it gets spicy. Yeah, here. Can you believe it? So, they arrest Julie. She's interviewed, and it is just something else. Julie this whole time has said that her and her husband were attacked in their warehouse and blah, blah, blah. You know the story. I've told it to you. Excuse me, I'm undressing. And now she's in police custody and she's already prepared a statement with her solicitor outlining what really happened. She said, get this, unbelievable, that David had died as a result of a failed suicide pact. So she was going to die with him, but then she chickened out and it was just David. David effectively committed suicide. She said they had planned to commit suicide together because the business was going under and they literally just could not see another way out. The idea was that they would start the fire and then lock themselves in the store cupboard together and die together. Julie admitted to lighting the fire, therefore holding the petrol can, but she changed her mind and left. The reason that she came up with this story about the intruders, the attackers, I've got pins and needles, mother. Why? The reason she came up with the story was to protect David's family. She didn't want his mum and dad to know that he had committed suicide. I smell bull. So she made up the story about the attackers, she dumped the keys, and then she called 999. There are some problems with this story, Julie. Why were you not in the storeroom? So if the plan was to die together, surely you would have set the fire, you would have both gone into the storeroom, and then she would have escaped, like just run out and like, but then how did the door end up being locked again? When the fire had already been lit, she'd be burnt. So this didn't make sense. The police were trying to understand her story, her version of events, and she had no answers to these questions. And then she pulled the old no comment thing. So yeah, she basically, she couldn't answer because it was a lie. The police searched the bungalow, and they also got a warrant to search all of their electrical devices, laptops, phones, all of that. And that was interesting. That was an interesting find. Someone had Googled how to poison somebody, how to hide poison in food. What could you put in food that wouldn't come up in a post-mortem? What a bitch. This is just suggestive of a premeditated murder. This was good for the prosecution because this showed that this was not just a snap, oh, I got angry with my husband and, well, I mean, come on. Even then, oh, I got so angry, I shoved him in a cupboard, I locked the door and then I lit a fire. Like, no, you bopped someone on the head, or I don't know. I don't even want to say all the horrible things that happen in moments of anger, but when they do, it's things like that, isn't it? A bop on the head or, a quick one of them, but not, shove you in a cupboard, lock the door. I mean, she would have had to have the keys. Where's this petrol can? That is not just like a snap. Oh, I snapped and hurt him. No, Julie. No. So this was good for the prosecution, especially that they'd found this evidence that she had already been looking up ways to kill David. Julie was charged with murder, of course. And then she went to trial because she did plead not guilty. Her trial began in December of 2011. And get this woman. Julie then had a third story to tell. This wasn't intruders. This wasn't suicide pact. This was, he wanted to die and she was assisting him. So no suicide pact, no. She was assisting her husband because he wanted to die. I have questions. Why would you be Googling how to hide things in food? What would come up in a post-mortem? Okay, maybe that one, but how to hide poison in food? Why would you need to hide it if he was up for it? You wouldn't. You're a silly cow. Now comes the interesting bit, I think, because it's like, why did she do this? Okay, why? And the reason really pisses me off because it's reminiscent of Family Annihilators. When they just cannot see how there can be a different way out. So they're like, oh, everyone's got to die. Sometimes their family has to die and they don't. Do you know what I mean? That's weird, isn't it? Okay, put that together. I don't know. But this is what is thought to have happened. Julie was the finance, the account, all of that business, that side of the business. And I couldn't find any further information. I don't know whether she was just absolutely shockingly shite at her job, but it feels like, and it seems like, Julie got the company into a state, into a financial shit show. David did not know about the situation. Poor innocent David, working away, thinking it's all fabulous, had not a clue. Hence, the post going to the petrol station. Why else would she do that unless she didn't want David to see what was coming through the post? Okay. Secondly, they spoke to the debtors. They spoke to the people they were in debt with, and they never ever spoke to David. Ever. They wanted to, they asked to, because it was his name as well on the business, and she would never let them speak to David. He was always ill or working abroad. So that just ties in, doesn't it? David didn't know what the hell was going on. And then, this is when it crumbled. Julie was then told that, it gets to a certain point and we know what happens, don't we, when you're in debt? Like, eventually, it doesn't just go away. She was told that the bailiffs were coming. They would be coming to her property to their bungalow, to their workshop, to seize goods to the amount of whatever they owed, over 40 grand. And they were also coming to arrest David. What the hell? I mean, I get it. That's a crap situation. That is like love. You know, her heart must have been pounding. She must have been panicking like a mo and just, what the hell is going on? You know, what am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this? You know, when you've made a mistake and you've cocked up, it's not good and you don't feel nice. You certainly don't then plan to murder your freaking husband. What the hell? Instead of coming clean, instead of trying to work out a plan, which there's always something you can do. Instead of that, instead of just taking the probable anger and upset David, who from all accounts was very nice, kind and loving and probably would have, been peed off, but supported her and they would have found a way through. Instead of coming clean, she plotted his murder. She bought petrol. She knew what she was doing. What an evil way. I wish she'd have got poison. I don't know. Is that worse? I'm not sure. I've gone mad. But I just don't know. It's a horrible case. Horrible case. She bought petrol. She lured him into the storeroom. She locked him in. She poured petrol, she lit it, and she left. She didn't just leave and ring 999. No. When they searched the property, they found singed hair that was then a match to Julie, and that was in their bathroom. And she hadn't gone into the bathroom the whole time that the emergency services were there on site. That means that she did that before they arrived, probably before she even called 999, probably to give herself more time to make sure that her husband died in this horrific way, and also to check her injuries, because she hadn't expected to be like in a vapor cloud storm situation. She hadn't expected that. So when that happened, she was probably like, oh my God, no, I need to check myself, because she had to make sure that her story would fit. Still thinking, clearly at that point. And what must David have thought? David, who had no idea what was going on with their business, not a clue. He thought it was all fabulous and normal and fine. And then he was locked into a room, and then that room just filled with smoke. That must have been the most confusing. I really hope that he was unconscious very quickly. I hope it wasn't awful and horrific like I'm imagining. I hope it was quick. I hope you just pass out. Don't tell me if I'm wrong. I hope just, gone. But I also hope that the confusion took over the brain rather than panic. That's what I hope. I hope he was just like, what the, trying to wrap his brain around it, and then he was unconscious. That's what I hope. Oh, God. Locked him in a cupboard and set it on fire. I mean, we all have bad days, but she also buggered off, didn't she, and dumped the keys. Well, she must have done that. She could have done that while she was waiting, but she probably did that before she even called 999, callous cow. Interestingly, when they went back, once they had their suspicions, they went back and they listened to the call. They listened to the 999 call again. I'm feeling spicy. I have only had the one glass, though. Nice. Am I going a bit rosy? I feel a bit warm. Sorry. They go back and listen to her 999. Listen, I can't not do that now. Listen. They go back and they listen to the 999 call, and it's odd. And they didn't think about it at the time. But when they've listened back, when she gets on the phone, she doesn't just go, oh my God, my husband is locked in a building. She doesn't do that. She doesn't go, quick, fire at me. No, she kind of she tells them the story. Me and my husband were in the workshop. 2 men came in. They attacked us. They locked my husband in the storeroom and they set it on fire. And now I've managed to get free, but he's locked inside. Just odd. On the 2nd or 3rd day of her trial, she then, 4th story now, changed her mind. She was like, I did it. I think she just thought she had no chance. They had so much evidence against her. She must have just been sitting there thinking, I am not going to get away with this at all. And she then admitted to it and said that she had killed her husband. probably hoping, and probably on the advice of her solicitor, I'm imagining, or her lawyer, whatever it is, probably said, you might get a lesser sentence if you just come clean. So maybe do that. And she did. She was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 23 years. In the aftermath, obviously, Roy and Janice, David's parents, were utterly heartbroken. This was just, it's such a weird case in a way because, I mean, it's nasty, isn't it? And it's just, I cannot understand what happens in someone's brain. Like I was saying with the family annihilators and stuff like that, they cannot see another way out. I mean, it's just, they choose that. That's their choice. It blows my mind. Judy. And what a waste. What an I know it always is. It always is, isn't it? A waste of life, tragic, most of the time. And then, but I couldn't get over that. Poor David. Just really senseless. Really senseless. And such a betrayal. She betrayed him so badly and his family. Yeah, what is that about? That is all I have on this case for you today. You've got this. You go, girl. Yeah, I've got this. Last week I was not having a good week. This week, much better. Oh, I'm not here next week, really sadly. I'm on holiday, and it was either try and squeeze in another filming session, research, loads of that, and I just can't at the moment. I just can't double up. So there is a break next week. There will be no video on the Friday, but I will be back the following week as per usual, and I'll probably be raring to go because I will have missed a week and I'll be like recharged from my holiday and I will have missed you all. So that is going to be a good week. Yeah. So next week, may I suggest a glass of gin in my absence, in a mug or a glass or a vase. Thank you so much for joining me this week for another episode of Sin and Tonic. I hope you can join me next week for another true crime video and a glass or a mug or a vase of gin. Repeated myself. I just got some amazing news through my phone about a friend. That's nice. You've got to take the light with the dark, my friends. Light with the dark. I'll see you in 2 weeks. I will miss you. Be sensible, be good, love you, goodbye.